Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please find your way back into the hall. Please find your way back into room Amatako so that we can continue with the proceedings with session B. Please, ladies and gentlemen, please find your way back into the hall. Thank you. We have everybody here. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, please find your way back into the room. We would like to commence with the proceedings. Continue with the proceedings, rather. Ladies and gentlemen, please find your way back inside. Kindly find your way back inside. Thank you.
Two. Ladies and gentlemen, can I just kindly ask that we all move back into the hall and proceed with the program? Ladies and gentlemen, if you can hear me, let's quickly just make our way back into the hall, please, and commence with the program. Thank you very much. Just another call to our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let's please quickly make our way back into the hall and commence with our discussions. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. As we await for the entire delegates to return back into the room, just like to thank you all for being with us once again, and thank you for being with us. We hope that you enjoyed the short coffee break that we had for you. Just as we quickly move into the program, we're of course still going to hold on to the same house rules. Let's just make sure that we have our phones on silent. That's just to respect our panelists and moderators that will be joining us this afternoon to give us a couple of presentations just to allow them that it is not disturbed. As well as our emergency exits all remain the same. That will be on your left, and on your right, that will be my right, or rather left on this side. And we have our organizing team in the room as well as outside at the registration area, should you need any help. That is, of course, in terms of medically, the safety and security as well. Please, let's just make sure to make use of those services. Since we are behind time, ladies and gentlemen, I'll just then move on to what the program suggests upon us. And it will be a presentation. There will be a couple of presentations as well as a panel discussion that we'll be experiencing here today. So our next session looks at the relationship between independents, international operators, as well as government, and how these stakeholders can work together to strengthen local participation. This is particularly very important as Namibia moves from exploration towards development and a greater activity across the value chain. So please, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the chair, or will be the panelist, or rather the moderator of this upcoming panel discussion. Let's put our hands together for Bolaji Ososami, Managing Director at Triumph Engineering.
Good morning and welcome back after the tea break, or coffee break as it may be. It's been a great session so far, and we're just going to get moving the same way, and we'll be looking at this session at independence and governments and how the local content bridge can be achieved with the support of these entities. We're also going to have a panel discussion after the presentations, and I'd like us to take notes. Please be attentive so that you can ask us questions after the panel, after the presentations. I'll start with my presentation on shaping a practical and inclusive local content model, moving from decision to dividends through independence, international operating companies, and government synergy. I'm going to be talking about the Nigerian experience, and we've done a bit about that in the morning, but I want us to still be attentive and take a few notes about some of the things that we can learn from this. And the other panelists as well will be speaking about the experiences from different countries all across Africa. So for Nigeria, next slide, please. For Nigeria, Nigeria moved from less than 5% value retention to 54% local content retention by 2022. This was achieved largely as a result of the enforcement of the Local Content Act. Now, I must say here that this is not a policy or an executive order, it's a law which everybody needs to comply with. And it's not something that it's going to change with administrations. So you definitely need a local content law to act as, to provide for the framework for local content. You need that law to anchor the framework of the local content policies in Namibia. So this was achieved not by discouraging foreign investments. I keep saying that local content is not to discourage foreign investment, but to ensure a predictable, enforceable regulatory framework that empowers indigenous technical service companies to participate in the oil industry. That's absolutely important, that local content is not fashioned to discourage foreign investments, but to build local capacity to build partnerships with foreign investments, with foreign service companies. So Nigeria was able to move from foreign ownership of operating licenses to a situation today where Nigeria produces 1.7 million barrels of crude oil daily. Of that, 60% of that production is under local operatorship. How was this achieved? Think about it. 1.7 million barrels a day, 60% of that is produced by locally owned operating companies. How was that built? Because of a lot of these companies are manned by ex-staff of the international oil companies like Shell, Exxon, Mobil, Chevron. They've been well-trained, they've got the experience, and they've now set up their own companies. They've come together to set up companies that have bought out the international operators. So we have a situation where, as a result of the Local Content Act, which says that if any foreign operator wants to divest, those shares must be sold to local companies. As a result of that, more than 800,000 barrels of crude oil production is under local operatorship. That's one of the highlights of the Local Content Act in Nigeria. Now, if we take that into the service companies, now, for Nigeria as well, we're having a situation where the local capacity of service companies is also being encouraged, is also growing as a result of Local Content Act. The law is that where the capacity to do the work is available locally, then they must be patronized. So what that has done is it has led into incentivize the local companies to invest in capacity to buy the critical equipments that are needed to carry out work locally. It's absolutely important because that's the only way you can develop local capacity. The next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Okay, I control it. Yeah. So what has been able to afford is we've had indigenous service champions like Geoplex, Drill Tech, that's established its footprints all across Africa in the high-end wireline and drilling services across 10 regional markets, Angola, Nigeria, Ghana, Mozambique, and even in India. So you're having local Nigerian companies that are becoming regional champions in providing services. This is as a result of Local Content Act. You have a company like Laser Engineering Limited, over 30 years of technical services in reservoir management and lab services. You have marine platforms, flagship for indigenous subsea engineering and marine vessel operators in Nigeria. So all these companies have grown out of the Local Content Act, and they are collaborating. They're forming partnerships, they're forming joint ventures with multinationals to achieve local content. Now, success story in Nigeria of local content is the Egina FPSO. This was FPSO built by Total Energies for the Egina field, OML 130 in Nigeria. This was a deep water field, about 1,600 meters in depth, and initial production was 200,000 barrels per day, you know. So the significant baseline was the largest FPSO built by Total. Is in excess, is larger than 3 football fields. The topsides and the module fabrications were done in Nigeria. The FPSO topsides integration was completed in Lagos, Nigeria, a first for Nigeria, and 6 of the massive topside modules were fabricated in Nigeria. The first offshore buoy, a 1,300-ton buoy, was fabricated and built in Nigeria ahead of schedule. This was done at the Avion facility in Port Harcourt. In terms of human capital and economic retention, 60% economic value was retained in country, 94% local engineering capacity was developed with 297,000 LTI free engineering man hours achieved. Over 3,000 Nigerians were trained as welders, engineers, and certified technicians in different fields. So this was a significant win for local content in Nigeria. And in terms of infrastructure, we talked about deep water slipways, upgraded quaysides, and state-of-the-art logistics bases that were built as a result of this Egina project in Nigeria. And this is following from domesticating services, insisting that these services must be done in country. So that's the picture of the Egina FPSOs, the largest FPSO built by Total to date, the size of about 3 football fields, and it's a huge success story for Nigeria. In terms of local leadership, local content has also helped Nigeria to develop the professionals needed to lead the industry. It took almost one of the oldest operating companies in Nigeria, Shell, started operating from about 1958, but it was only in 2004 that the leadership of the international oil companies started to be localized. And to date, and now, almost all the international companies in Nigeria, Shell, ExxonMobil, Chevron, have Nigerians at the leadership level, at the board level, either as executive directors, operations directors, and so on. So that's as a result of building capacity, training the professionals in the industry, embedding them to work with the international oil companies so that the transfer of leadership can be achieved. So it's important that the capital gap is breached because a lot of indigenous companies may not have the financial muscle to achieve this. So it's important that funding is made available for local companies. One of the initiatives that is going on right now is the establishment of the Africa Energy Bank that's capitalized at about $5 billion to help African companies build capacity and deliver projects in Africa. Yeah, so project-based lending and establishment of local content funds. This must be deliberate. It must be deliberate to achieve that. In Nigeria, we have what we call the Nigerian Content Development Fund. 1% of the contract values within the upstream sector is allocated into that, is set aside and allocated into that fund to help build capacity of local companies. In terms of the experience gap, we hear a lot that Namibia's oil discoveries in the ultra deep water. So you will find out that there may not be so many local companies that have capacity or skills to operate at that level. So what are the solutions for this? Collaboration. We spoke about this at the first session. There must be collaboration between local companies to form joint ventures and be able to take on bigger projects. It's the only way to go forward. You know, and then there must be joint ventures between local companies and foreign companies as well, so that technology and skills are transferred, capacity is developed. Technical certification without capital is dead. So aligning accessible funding with genuine skills transfer is definitely a definite blueprint to transition Namibian companies from passive observers to active industry players. So for the IOCs, you normally find out they have very aggressive timelines on their projects. They want to get to market on time, and they want their projects delivered in time, within cost, no variations and all that. And those are going to be some of the challenges that local content is going to face. So very quickly, you need to begin to think about how you're going to reconcile these pressures from the IOCs, and IOCs as well to begin to think about strategies on how to bridge this gap. So in terms of regional synergy, we have the Africa Local Content Organization that has been initiated, created, and I think even last year, the conference here was inaugurated. The essence of the Africa Local, of this organization, is to advocate for equipment pooling and cross-border partnerships, developing capacity across the continent. We should stop thinking and operating in silos. When we think Africa-wide, we're a huge market, and it makes sense to invest and develop capacity at that scale, at that level. So Namibia can leverage on this, on localized expertise from companies like Marine Platform, Opretech in Angola, and similar companies all across the continent. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Let's partner with companies and countries that already have the capacity, and we're more than willing to share that capacity with Namibia. So we're hoping somebody asked, what will local content look like? At the end of the day, we want to move away from zero value retention in country to as much as 50% in record time. The success is going to be measured on the hubs, the employments created in places like Lüderitz and Walfish Bay, the facilities, the fabrication yards that are going to be developed there, the marine bases, logistics bases that's going to be developed there, and the employment that's going to be achieved within Namibia. That's the way to track local government, local content. So I'll end it here and allow and introduce the other panelists to come on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let's give Mr. Bolaji a round of applause. I think it was brief but also very insightful. And we will, of course, then hear from him and his fellow panelists as they come on in a short while. I just want to give an announcement that was handed to me. The owners or drivers of the following vehicles, please, that are parked in the Avis car rental parkings, please, you are kindly asked to just please remove those vehicles from that area. I do not have all the specifics or colors of all the vehicles, but if you are having a Volkswagen Tigo with the number plate N259-635 Windhoek, please, you are asked to remove the vehicle from that area. We also have a Ford Raptor with the number plate N50557 Windhoek. Please just also help us remove the vehicle from there. The vehicle with the number plate N820623 Windhoek, a Golf 7 TSI, red. Please, we are asked to remove the vehicle from there. N240612 Polo, please just help us remove the vehicle from that. N71949W GD6 Hilux. N7617W, that's Windhoek. Golf 7 GTI, also a red one. Please, you are asked to remove the vehicle from the Avis car rental parking. We have a Starlet Cross with the number plate N94115 Windhoek. Red BMW 2029. I'm not sure what the code here is or what it means, but it's a red BMW also parked in the Avis parking area. Please, there are threats that your car might be clamped or towed, so please let's just heed with those responsibilities. And then there's also finally a Haval KTE with the number plate N33008W. I'll now hand over back to Mr. Bolaji to introduce the panel discussion that we are expecting. Please, it's over to you.
Okay, I would like to welcome to the panel for discussion this afternoon Jessica Shiyune, a national content expert from Uganda. Please clap for her. Utara Yauch, legal practitioner, JNN Incorporated. Mr. Guy Kassa Kumba, Executive Director, Institute for Public Policy Research in Gabon. Please clap for him. And Mr. Graham Hopwood, Executive Director, Institute for Public Policy Research. You're welcome, sir. So, to start this panel session, I'll be calling on Utara to come and make a presentation, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Alrighty. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to my panelists and thank you to the organizers for this opportunity. I'm not going to hone in so much on the local content per se. I think we have our counterparts that can teach us lessons. Rather, my discussion point today is rather just to canvass the law in Namibia as it is. As we know, there are a lot of movements. So mine is just to really give everyone a broad overview of what is currently happening in Namibia. So there are really 4 questions that I'm going to be dealing with today. And the first one is, where does petroleum law in Namibia come from? Where does it stand as it is today? Is it fit for purpose, measured against 5 benchmarks, which I'll also discuss? And what can Namibia learn from other countries? So, First of all, Namibia has a constitution. We are a constitutional-based democracy, so the constitution is our supreme law. In terms of Article 100 of our constitution, land, water, natural resources below and above the surface, in the continental shelf, the territorial waters, and the exclusive economic zones all belong to the state. So number one, ownership vests with the state. That's very different from the state being a custodian. Custodian just administers on behalf of someone else. Our state needs to take responsibility for this resource that we have here. Namibia already has petroleum legislation in place. The timeline, as you can see over here, runs like this. In 1991, Parliament passed the Petroleum Exploration and Production Act, number 2, as well as the Petroleum Taxation Act, number 3, both of which came into force in 1992. Between 1993 and 1998, some amendments were made, particularly our decommissioning regime. In 1998 and again in 2007, we got successive versions of the Model Petroleum Agreement, which is essentially a template agreement between government and the license holders. Then we had the discoveries that arrived. Shell confirmed its Graf discovery on the 4th of February 2022, followed by Yonka on the 6th of March 2023, both on PEL 39. Total Energies drilled Venus 1 in Block 2913B, and then Galp, Namco, and Custos found Mopane on PEL 83. And then in 2025 and 2026, the law to try to catch up with these discoveries. The Petroleum Exploration and Production Amendment Bill, Bill B12 of 2025, had its first reading on the 4th of February 2026. This law has still not passed, and it's still an active debate in Parliament as we speak. So, petroleum law is a system. It is not one isolated act. And I want to name, just broadly, 5 different instruments that make it up before I discuss on a high-level summary, what each and every one of them do. So the Petroleum Exploration Act is the backbone. It deals with licensing, exploration, and production operations, royalties, decommissioning, and enforcement. Sitting alongside that, we have the Petroleum Taxation Act 3 of 1991 that governs the income tax as well as the additional profits tax. Then, under Section 76A of our Exploration and Production Act, we have health and safety regulations, as well as environmental regulations pertaining to the operations themselves. Then, of course, we have the Model Petroleum Agreement, the 1998 and 2007 template contracts that government actually signs with each license holder, and this translates then into the project-specific terms, which regulate the work program, the state participation, cost recovery. And lastly, we have one instrument, which I'm not going to go into because that's for downstream, and that's the Petroleum Products and Energy Act 13 of 1990. So what does the law actually say? And again, this is just a high-level overview. So on rights and regulations, before a company can even explore, it signs a petroleum agreement with the government. If it finds something, that discovery has to be formally declared before production license can be granted. When a license is held, that company has to meet certain conditions attached to it and follow the safety regulations. And when production ends, obviously the company has to have a decommissioning plan in place, backed by money set aside in a trust fund. In terms of its fiscal regime, Namibia charges a royalty of 5% of market value on current licenses, a petroleum income tax of 35%, and a 3-tier additional profits tax that only kicks in once a project clears a 15% rate of return. So, In addition thereto, we also have those health and safety regulations that run alongside it. So really the takeaway is this, that it is not one law. It is a full life cycle from the first agreement to the final cleanup, with money changing hands at every stage. So that's broadly what Namibia's law is. And the question really becomes, is it fit for purpose? And this is a 5 benchmark test, which I'll briefly run over. So, the first benchmark is the decision-making authority. We have already seen that Namibia, as the owner, is the one that's meant to decide. But deciding requires an institution with clear authority as well as clear accountability for how it uses that authority. The second benchmark is a complete revenue framework. We have just talked through the royalty and income taxes, and who pays is what is important for present purposes. The third benchmark, which I believe my fellow panelists will get into, is also real local participation. This is about jobs, skills, Namibian businesses, technology, and not just government revenue. And it's also where NAMCOR's own stake in these projects become relevant. The fourth benchmark is resource and environmental protection, and the fifth is then how, the enforceable closures at the end of the day. So, it helps to look outside our borders to see what lessons we can learn from countries that have been here already. So I'm going to look at 3 comparators. The first being Norway. Namibia should not by any means copy Norway verbatim, but it can learn from its principles. The Norwegian state holds the proprietary rights to the subsea petroleum deposits. Its laws required resource management aimed at maximizing value to society, and it prohibits waste. And no field may be developed without government approval of a formal plan for development as well as operation. Here's one thing that is worth noting. Norway charges a royalty of 0. And if you look at only that number, you would think Norway captures almost no value of its oil. But once you look at Norway's direct financial stake in every license managed through the state company called Petoro, and the dividends Norway earns as a majority owner of Equinor, its effective take rises to 78% at the margin. The lesson is this: never compare royalty rates on their own. One has to compare the total state take. So that brings me actually to Namibia's NAMCOR. And the recommendation here is that Namibia's national oil company already has participation in the project, but how much of a stake it holds, on what terms, is negotiated on a deal-by-deal basis inside each and every petroleum agreement. There's no dedicated chapter in our law as it speaks to govern NAMCOR's participation as a matter of statutory right. It is negotiated on a piecemeal basis. If Norway's experience teaches Namibia anything concrete, it is this: NAMCOR should be carrying a bigger stake in these projects, and that stake should be governed by its own chapter in our legislation. I now move on to Nigeria. I see we have a number of Nigerian brothers and sisters in the house. So please correct me where I'm wrong. I'm not the expert. You guys are, but this is what the research tells us. So from Nigeria, we can learn a different lesson about regulatory power, not necessarily fiscal design. Its Petroleum Industry Act of 2021 consolidated governance, institutions, and fiscal rules into one modern framework, and it has since been restated in the Nigeria Tax Act of 2025. The details that matters for Namibia is the following. Nigeria's regulator has the legal power to set the price used, to value royalty, and to compel companies to jointly develop a reservoir that crosses license boundaries rather than leaving it up to negotiations between companies themselves. Namibia's current law and the bill before Parliament give our regulator neither power. Lastly, let's look at Guyana. This is probably closest to home because Guyana is a small economy that became a first-time oil producer, exactly the same position Namibia is in right now. Guyana's first oil flowed in December 2019 on discoveries first announced in 2015. But the fiscal terms, a royalty of 2%, a 75% cost oil ceiling, and a 50-50 split of the profit oil were fixed back in 2016 before anyone actually understood how large the resource actually was. The reserves turned out to be many times bigger than expected, and Guyana did eventually reform with the new model terms encapsulated in the Natural Resources Fund Act of 2021. But the field producing today, Starbrook, still runs on the original 2016 terms. They have not been able to unwind from this. So therefore, the takeaway from Namibia is that Guyana shows exactly what happens when fiscal terms are settled informally and late. They calcify before the country understands what is actually found. And Namibia is showing the same early warning signs. But it still has time to fix that, which time Guyana did not have. So let's just conclude on that and look at these lessons side by side, because each three teachers point to one lesson, which is that Namibia needs to build the framework before the oil flows and not afterwards. So, on the state role, Norway manages its stake through Petoro and holds 67% of Equinor. Nigeria has commercialized its national oil company, NPC Limited, under its 2021 Act. Guyana's 2016 agreement gave the state no share at all. On the regulator, Norway keeps regulation deliberately separate from policy. Nigeria combines it, regulating the licensing as well as price setting. And then on fiscal design, Norway has no royalty, but a 78% marginal tax rate, plus its own ownership stake. So, where does that leave Namibia, and how do we measure up? Let us turn to the question that draws the most public attention at the moment. How much does Namibia actually receive, and how do we know? Namibia's fiscal architecture of the 5% royalty, 35% income tax cap, and the tiered profit tax I described earlier is what, alongside the 15% real rate of return, is what Namibia currently has. The IMF has reviewed this regime in June 2024 and found that it balances investor and government interests and is fit for purpose. However, one nuance worth flagging is the fact that this has not been tested. Our legislation has not been stress tested yet. And this then begs the question, where should Namibia strengthen its law? On development and revenue, Namibia needs a real development plan approval, the same way Norway has with a published criteria. We need proper governance oversight of joint operating agreements, and we need to have that in relation to cost disclosure, audit rights, transfer pricing controls, and publication of petroleum agreements themselves, subject to genuinely confidential commercial terms. We have been making movements, though. The National Upstream Petroleum Local Content Policy itself was now approved at the 25th Cabinet meeting, targeting employment, local procurement, enterprise development, technologies, and skills transfer. But it's a policy, and we've heard from the first speaker that Nigeria has an act this is still a policy. I've been warned for time here, so I'm just going to speed through the rest. But really, I think what we need to look at is targeting the framework that we want to build. And that does not mean that we necessarily need to over-regulate. The real question is what we need to do in order to achieve a law that is fit for purpose. So really, what we need at the end of the day is a real development plan approval gate, the way Norway requires, a regulator with genuine economic and pricing power, the way Nigeria eventually built it, a fiscal system that is stress tested and reviewed before its terms lock in exactly the same way that Guyana did not manage. And we need a NAM core with a proper stake and its own chapter in our law, and not on a case-by-case negotiation basis. So I hope that gives everyone an overview. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Utara, for taking us through the legal and policy imperatives to establish a successful local content act in Namibia and for the benefit of Namibians. So we're going to move along very quickly. I'll be inviting Jessica, a national content expert from Uganda, to talk us through what's going on in Uganda and how, from my experience, how Namibia can benefit from what has happened in Uganda. Please clap for Jessica. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Cheune from Uganda. And really, I think mine is going to be much short. I need to shrink in the interest of time. But what I'm going to talk about, Uganda is also a nascent oil producer. We were expecting our first oil December this year, but because of the interruptions in the Hormuz, we most probably will have it June next year. Definitely, Uganda is onshore and Namibia is offshore, but we have similar lessons to learn. So as we speak now, Uganda is employing approximately 14,000 people in the oil and gas sector who are Ugandans, approximately 90%. And then the contracts that have been awarded are about $5 billion, and approximately $2 billion has gone to Ugandan companies and companies that are in partnership with Ugandan companies. So it is the other three that has gone directly to internationals. Then we have nearly 3,000 suppliers that have been developed, and capacity building to over 14,000. But how did this country get to that level of success? Definitely, we had commercial discoveries in 2016. Then we had our National Oil and Gas Policy developed, and then the Industrial Baseline Survey, then the Petroleum Acts, and the National Content Regulations Supplier Development Program started in 2017. 2018, we enhanced our National Content Policy, and then we had FID in 2020, and large-scale implementation started. So talking about the national vision before production, Uganda enacted the National Oil and Gas Policy in 2018 with a sole goal to make sure that the petroleum resource is used to eradicate poverty and create lasting value within the country. So money, if it is not channeled, even our own finances, if you do not channel your finances directly to achieve an objective, that money can just go into buying private jets, holidays in Milan and all those other places. So Namibia should make sure that the money is channeled to actually develop the country and not to be wasted in holidays and expenditure. Then Uganda did conduct a national industrial baseline survey, which basically mapped out the capacity and potential of Ugandans to supply the oil and gas sector. This is what identified the gaps and was able to actually inform the country on what exactly the country can do, what kind of skills we had, and then to what level those skills are and to what level those suppliers are. Definitely we had a number of suppliers who did not have the capacity to supply the oil and gas sector, either in HSC, in finance, and also in equipment, but also the skills. So you could have a welder who is welding gates for homes and stuff, but the welding that is required for pipeline completely is different. So we had to upskill our people, but not from the blue, but because we had an informed industrial baseline survey. Then Uganda built institutions before the projects were started, were commercialized is the right word. We have the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, which is responsible for policy, then the Uganda Petroleum Authority, that is the regulator, and then the National Oil Company, that is the commercial arm of government and actually the one that gets into joint ventures. This separation improved transparency and accountability, where many companies, they have the same, National Oil Company doing everything. Uganda separated the three, and that could be a strong lesson for Namibia as well. Then the measure of local capacity before setting targets. Uganda has 16 ring-fenced services for Ugandan companies, but this does not mean that Ugandans cannot do others, but these 16 are those ones that were actually found that Ugandans could do before even upskilling them. And so these were ring-fenced for Ugandans, but as Ugandans were being developed to take on other sectors of the economy. So as we are working on setting targets and capacity, they need to be realistic according to the level of capability of the nationals. Then we did develop people before jobs existed. The 14,000 jobs we have and the upskilling of trades like the welders, the instrumentalists, the truck drivers, and all that was done. But also Uganda has focused on training Ugandans for those skills that are transferable to other sectors of the economy. That once exploration and development is done, very few jobs will be available, but these people can be outsourced to other sectors of the economy. And then we did develop suppliers before procurement began. Definitely that is how we were able to get Ugandan companies to be tier 1 contractors. So we had challenges in HSC and in access to finance and joint venture promotions. All these things we did, but because we did create a national supplier database where Ugandans and internationals all register, and would really request all of you to register on Uganda's national supply database because we have a lot of other projects ongoing. Registration is done online and is free of charge. And so the lesson for Namibia now is to basically start developing your suppliers. They could be doing the same things that are required of the oil and gas sector, but definitely the level and skill and expertise required may not necessarily be available. We also did focus on community content. Yours is offshore, ours is onshore, so our projects are within communities. And each one of the oil companies did focus basically on an area, not necessarily that they don't do others, but you could find like UNOC on agriculture development. And right now, the suppliers we did develop are actually exporting food to other countries. So which means that as they are supplying food to the oil and gas sector, they have also developed the skills to supply for the international markets. So, and this is including technical training, the best skilled labor, the people who supply tea, who do the compounds and all that, they also need to be supported to be able to operate in the industry. So we should not look at only the big boys and big girls, but also the people who can do basic work. Then plan for industrialization and not just oil production. Uganda is planning for refinery, we are planning for an industrial park, we are planning for storage terminals for refined products, petrochemical industry, fertilizers, manufacturing, logistics, and agro-processing. And so we should look at a value chain as opposed to just looking at get companies and develop products for oil and gas. And then the academia